I was 39 when I made the small choice that ruined my 40s, and it didn't feel like a fork in the road. It felt like a practical thing a husband does on a weekday. The accounting office on West Madison smelled like burnt coffee and copier toner, and the rain outside made the windows look smeared like the city was tired too. Frank didn't even close his door when he called me in. That was his trick. Keep it open so it feels friendly, like nothing serious is happening. He slid a folder across his desk and said, "Senior manager, more pay, better title. I need someone dependable. You've been dependable." I believed then that dependable was the highest compliment a man could earn, the kind that lets you sleep at night even when you're uneasy. I believed the goal was to be needed. I had a mortgage, 2 kids, and a wife who could turn 3 leftovers into a dinner that felt like a meal. In my head, the choice was simple. Take the rung or risk the fall. There was a paragraph in the offer about being the point person for a new business as needed. It was just ink on paper, but I felt my stomach pinch when I read it. I also felt something else, quieter, the thought of my garage, the old table saw I'd inherited, the half idea of making furniture on weekends the way my grandfather did. I've been collecting boards like a man collecting excuses. Here's the first gotcha, and it still stings when I say it. The day you stop naming what you want is the day you start calling your life responsible. I signed and I told myself the tight feeling in my chest was just nerves, not warning. That evening I drove home with the radio low, palms tight on the steering wheel. At the house, Ben was on the living room rug with toy cars, and Lily was at the table practicing cursive, tongue pressed to the corner of her mouth. My wife looked up from the stove, hair clipped back, sleeves rolled. I kissed her and said, "Good news, I got the promotion." She smiled, but her eyes stayed careful. "What does it mean for hours?" she asked. I believed then that love meant saying, "I can handle it." So I said it, clean and fast, like ripping a bandage. The second gotcha is simple. A promise you can't keep doesn't break once. It breaks every day. After the kids were asleep, I walked into the garage and ran my hand over a rough plank leaning against the wall. Dust already coated it like a quiet verdict. The house settled around me, that soft creak of a place that trusts you. I stood there longer than I needed to, because something in me knew I had just traded a life I wanted for a life I could explain. The next morning my 40s began, and I walked into them like a man stepping onto a moving walkway, pretending he was still choosing the pace. The title change came with a new calendar and a new kind of silence at home. The clients Frank handed me weren't just messy, they were entitled, the kind that call you buddy while they drain your evenings. The first week I came home after dinner, then I came home during dishes, then I started coming home after the lights were out in the kitchen. I believed then that busy season was a weather pattern. I believed if I kept my head down it would pass. Time doesn't pass for you. It passes through you, taking whatever you didn't bother to protect. One night I walked in at 10 and found Lily at the kitchen table with a math worksheet, hair still damp from the shower. My wife had left a plate in the oven, warmed but drying at the edges. Lily looked up and said, "I waited." She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. She said it the way you say a fact you're learning to live with. I sat beside her and tried to help with fractions, but my eyes kept drifting to the work bag by the door like it was another child needing attention. Gotcha number 3. You can be in the room and still abandon the people in it. That weekend, I tried to compensate like a man paying a debt with loose change. I took the kids to the hardware store, bought sandpaper and a drill bit, and promised we'd build a birdhouse. We laid the wood out on the garage floor. For 10 minutes, it felt like we were back on the same team. Then my phone buzzed. A payroll report didn't balance. Just a quick fix, the email said. I stepped into the driveway to handle it and stared at my screen while the sun moved across the yard. 10 minutes turned into an hour. When I came back, Ben had wandered inside, Lily had curled under a blanket, and the wood sat there like a staged photo of the father I kept postponing. My wife met me in the hallway. "You're always half here," she said. No yelling, just tiredness, which is worse because tiredness means the argument already happened in her head. If this is what the promotion costs, I'm not sure we can afford it. I wanted to say I was doing it for them, that I was protecting us. The gotcha is this. For you, it can be a disguise for because I'm scared. Instead, I said, it'll calm down soon. On Monday, Frank leaned on my doorframe and asked if I could take another account, just until we hire. My mouth said yes before my brain finished reading the sentence. I heard myself agree and felt something click tighter, like a belt pulled one notch too far. That night, as I drove home in the dark, I realized the promotion hadn't given me more power. It had given other people more access to me, and I had signed the key over with a smile. By 41, the garage stopped smelling like sawdust and started smelling like storage. The plank I'd touched the night of the promotion was still there, now buried behind soccer cones and a broken stroller. When I opened the door, I felt like I was trespassing in a room that used to belong to me. Frank started forwarding emails on Sundays with subject lines like, "Quick question." Quick questions are never quick. They're just questions that don't respect doors. I answered from the couch while the kids watched cartoons, pretending I was present because my body was in the same space. My wife would glance at me, then at the kids, like she was deciding what was safe to hope for. I believed then that providing was the same as loving. If the bills were paid, the rest would take care of itself. Money can keep the lights on, but it can't keep you from disappearing under those lights. Lily's spring play should have been my wake-up. Paper flowers taped to the stage, kids' voices cracking on their lines. I promised I'd be there early. I even left work at 4, feeling proud of myself for doing what any normal father does without applause. I parked at the school and checked my phone in the car, telling myself I'd answer one email so I could walk in clear-headed. One email became 2 calls, then another message. When I finally slipped into the auditorium, the lights were down. Lily was already on stage, face bright in the spotlight. I tried to catch her eye to be a late-arriving hero. She didn't look at me once. After the show, she hugged her friends and then came to me. "It's okay," she said. "I didn't expect you." The sentence landed like a brick wrapped in cotton. I believed then that an apology could refill the minutes. It can't. Here's the gotcha. When people stop expecting you, they stop needing you. And that's how you vanish while still standing in the doorway. That night, my wife rinsed dishes with slow, deliberate motions. "Do you hear yourself?" she asked. "You keep saying just this once, but it's been years." I wanted to defend myself, to point at the mortgage, to point at the grocery receipts, to point at the world and say, see, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But I understood now that my 40s weren't being ruined by one dramatic mistake. They were being eroded by a quiet agreement I made with my own excuses. I still went in early the next day. That's the part I hate admitting. I did it because being needed at work had become easier than being accountable at home. I went in early because the office expected it and because my family had started learning not to. On the drive in, I passed the school and saw a custodian dragging a trash bag of paper flowers to the dumpster. I thought, that's what moments look like when you miss them. They become trash someone else hauls away. At 42, my body sent a warning I pretended was a minor inconvenience. It started as headaches behind my eyes, then numbness in my left hand when I held the steering wheel too long. I told myself it was stress. Stress meant I mattered. That was the story I used to keep going. One Wednesday, in a conference room that was too cold, a client smiled while he argued for a discount. Halfway through his sentence, the room tilted. Not dramatic. Just enough that the edges blurred and my hearing went hollow. I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, and gripped the sink until the world steadied. In the mirror, my face looked older than it had that morning. My eyes had the faraway look I'd seen in my father near the end of his working years, the look of a man who keeps leaving himself behind to get through the day. I believed then that if I admitted weakness, everything would collapse. Pillars don't complain, and I had built my whole identity on not needing help. Gotcha. You can ignore your limits, but your limits never ignore you. That weekend, Ben had a baseball game. He was 12 and still glanced at the bleachers after every hit, checking if you saw it. I told him I'd be there, even put it in my calendar like a man who thought reminders were the same as presents. The night before, Frank called. Another employee had quit. We were in a bind. Could I come in Saturday morning just for a few hours? I hesitated. I could hear the field in my head, the clink of cleats, the parents calling out. Then I heard my own voice say, "Sure, smooth and practiced." Saturday morning, I sat at my desk while sunlight warmed the windows. At noon, my wife texted a video. Ben at the plate, a clean swing, the ball flying. My wife's laugh in the background. At the end, Ben looked toward the bleachers, squinting, searching. The video cut off before his face changed. My throat tightened so hard it hurt to swallow. I finally understood the real damage. My small choice wasn't only stealing my time, it was teaching my kids what to expect from me, and teaching my wife she had to carry the family alone. Absence is a habit, and I had practiced it daily. That night, Ben sat on his bed, turning a baseball in his hands. "You see the video?" he asked. "I did," I said. He nodded once. "Coach said I did good." "I'm proud of you," I told him. He kept turning the ball. "It's okay," he said, sounding older than 12. "Mom's always there." That sentence didn't start a fight. It started a silence that followed me into Monday, when Frank offered me another opportunity that came with late nights. I felt my mouth start to say yes. This time I stopped on the edge of the word, and for the first time I looked down at what I'd been stepping into. Segment 5. Word count 504. Character count 2,774. The first time I said no, my voice sounded unfamiliar to me, like I'd borrowed it from someone braver. Frank stood in my doorway with his tie loosened, holding a folder like it was a gift. "Henderson audit," he said. "Couple late nights. Good look for you." The reflex rose in my chest, the automatic nod I'd trained into myself. Then I pictured Ben searching the bleachers. I pictured Lily saying she didn't expect me. I pictured my wife rinsing dishes like she was washing away a life she didn't choose. Something in me finally refused to be polite. "I can't," I said. Frank blinked. "Can't?" "I'm at capacity," I repeated slower so I didn't retreat. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "Your senior manager? This is what it is?" I believed then, for the first time in years, that what it is can change if you're willing to pay the price up front instead of over decades. Gotcha. If you never risk being disliked, you'll spend your life being used. "Then we need to hire," I said. "Or we need to lose a client." Frank's mouth tightened. "Think about it," he said, waving me away like I was a problem to reschedule. I sat at my desk waiting for punishment. An email, a lecture, the floor opening, and nothing happened. The world didn't end. The only thing that changed was I could feel how tense my body had been for years, like I'd been bracing for a hit that never stopped coming. That night I came home before dinner on purpose. My wife looked up from the stove like she was seeing a ghost. "Is everything okay?" she asked. I said no, I told her. She held the spoon still. "To what?" "To another late night," I said. "To more of this." She didn't celebrate. She just exhaled, a long breath I didn't realize she'd been holding. Her shoulders dropped like she set down a heavy box. We ate together, the kids talking about school and friends. I listened like the words mattered because they did. After dinner, Ben asked if I'd throw the ball with him. We stood under the porch light, cold air clean in our lungs, the ball snapping into my glove and back into his hands. Ordinary doesn't erase damage, it just shows you what you missed. Later, my wife and I sat with the TV off. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I'm scared," I said, "of waking up at 60 and realizing I don't know you anymore, of my kids remembering me as a man who was always tired." She nodded, eyes on the dark window. "I've been lonely in this house," she said, "even when you're sitting right next to me." The next morning, an invite hit my inbox. Performance discussion. My stomach dropped. The old pattern reached for me again. Then I grabbed my coat and went in anyway, because turning your life around isn't one decision. It's the decision to keep deciding. Segment 6. Word count 513. Dare. Character count 2,841. Frank's performance discussion was a test dressed up as concern. He leaned back and spoke in that calm voice people use when they want to sound reasonable while they corner you. "You seem less hungry," he said. "Not as available." He slid quarterly numbers across the desk, like a judge sliding paperwork. "If you can't carry the load, we'll have to reconsider compensation." In the past, that would have landed like thunder. This time it landed like a receipt. Security built on self-erasure isn't security. It's a leash you call a belt, and you keep tightening it until you can't breathe without asking permission. I looked at him and asked, "So this is a pay cut if I don't keep working nights?" Frank's eyes narrowed. "I'm trying to help you succeed." He said, "Gotcha. The job will replace you faster than your family can forgive you." "There it is," I replied. "Success?" I watched his face change, just slightly, the way someone looks when they realize the trick isn't working. I left the meeting with my hands shaking and sat in my car, letting the cold air sting my lungs. Then I did something I'd avoided for years. I called my wife in the middle of the day. "I think I need to change jobs," I said. There was a pause. Not disbelief, just the sound of her taking the words seriously. "Okay," she said. "What does that mean?" "It means less money for a while," I admitted. "It means starting over at 43. "Do we have a plan?" she asked. "We can make one," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I believed myself. That night, we sat at the kitchen table with a plain spiral notebook. We wrote down expenses, debts, what we could cut without collapsing. We talked about selling the second car. We talked about skipping the vacation we kept postponing anyway. We talked about how close we were to drifting into a marriage that functioned like roommates with shared bills. My wife said, "I don't need you to be impressive, I need you to be here." The sentence was simple enough to be true. Over the next weeks, I updated my resume at night, not for overtime, but for escape. I reached out to an old colleague who'd moved to a smaller firm. I interviewed in a cramped office above a bakery where the owner asked about my kids before he asked about my credentials. It felt suspicious, like kindness must be a trick. I realized I had been trained to confuse urgency with importance and exhaustion with worth. The offer came. Lower salary, fewer titles, a schedule that ended like a normal day. I didn't accept immediately. I drove home, sat in the driveway, and listened to laughter through the walls. "Gotcha? The life you want is usually right behind the door you keep walking past." I went in, ate dinner with my family, and the next morning I signed my notice. This time I knew exactly what I was choosing. I started at the smaller firm 2 weeks after I quit. Frank barely said goodbye. He shook my hand like a man returning a tool to the drawer. Walking out, I expected triumph. What I felt was grief. Grief for the years I'd handed over, and for the version of me who thought he had to. The new office was above a bakery, so the hallway smelled like bread in the morning. At 5:30, people stood up and left. The first time it happened, I panicked, waiting for punishment. Nobody punished anyone. The building emptied like that was normal, and I realized how warped my old normal had been. I had believed rest was earned by suffering. Watching people go home on time made that belief look ridiculous. Gotcha. If you need exhaustion to feel valuable, you'll protect the thing that's killing you. At home, repair came slower. Trust doesn't snap back like a rubber band. It returns cautiously, watching to see if you'll disappear again. I started making dinner once a week, chili, pasta, chicken, and the kids treated it like an event. Ben would say, "Dad's cooking," like it was a rare sighting. Lily watched me chop onions like she didn't want to hope too hard. One Sunday, I went into the garage and moved the clutter aside. I pulled that old plank out from behind boxes, and dust rose in a thin cloud. For a second, I was back at 39, hand on the wood, listening to the house settle. I set up my tools again, slow and careful, like I was rebuilding a part of myself with screws and patience. Ben appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Making a table," I said. "If you want to help." He shrugged and stepped in. We measured, marked, cut. The saw screamed, and the scent of fresh pine filled the space, sharp and alive. Lily came out holding hot chocolate and sat on an upside-down bucket. After a while, she said, "I like this." "This?" I asked. "This," she said, gesturing at the garage and us. "It feels normal." I understood then that my family didn't want grand gestures. They wanted continuity. They wanted the boring reliability I'd mistaken for mediocrity. That winter, my wife and I started walking after dinner. Sometimes we talked about nothing. Sometimes we spoke about everything we hadn't said for years. One night, she admitted, "I was starting to picture my life without you in it, not because I didn't love you, but because it was easier than waiting." I didn't defend myself. I just stayed, and I kept staying because repair isn't a speech. It's repetition. By 45, the table was finished. We carried it into the dining room, set it down, and ate at it that night. The wood wasn't perfect, but it held the weight of plates and elbows and conversation, and I could finally feel the decade turning in inches I could live inside. In Falior, segment 8, word count 534, character count 2901. Ondeator. I'm older now, and when I look back on my 40s, I don't remember the quarterly numbers or the clients who called me buddy. I remember Lily's voice when she said she didn't expect me. I remember Ben turning that baseball in his hands like he was learning disappointment early. I remember my wife's tiredness, which was never loud, just steady, like water wearing down stone. The decade wasn't ruined in an explosion. It was ruined the way a shoreline disappears, one tide at a time. I believed then that the small choice was harmless because it was small. One more account, one more late night, one more yes to keep the peace. I understand now that repetition is what multiplies a decision into a destiny. Gotcha. The most dangerous decisions are the ones you make while telling yourself you're not deciding. Even after I changed jobs, even after dinners returned and the garage filled with sawdust again, I lived in the shadow of what I'd trained my family to expect. Lily went to college and called her mother first when she had good news. Ben learned independence early. My wife and I rebuilt, but we rebuilt with scars, and I don't blame her for having them. Sometimes I'm late because traffic is bad, and when I walk in, I see my wife's eyes flicker toward the old story. I don't get offended. I don't ask for credit. Trust isn't owed. It's earned in the same currency it was spent. Time. Years later, Lily came home for a weekend and found me in the garage sanding a tabletop. Sunlight cut through the door and caught the dust as it floated. She stood beside me and asked, "Do you ever think about that play?" "I do," I said. She nodded. I think about it too, she said, but not the way you think. I remember Mom being there, and I remember you coming in late and looking like you wanted to be different. That stuck with me. I didn't know what to do with that, so I did the only honest thing. I'm sorry I made you carry that, I said. I know, she said softly, hand on the wood, feeling the grain. The moment didn't erase the past, but it proved the future was still alive. When I tell this story now, I'm not trying to turn it into a lesson. I'm telling it because I lived it and because I learned the hard way that life isn't stolen from you by villains. It's traded away in small deals you sign while you're tired. The promotion wasn't the ruin. The habit of surrender was. Final gotcha. If you don't choose your life on purpose, something else will choose it for you, and it will never pick what you actually love. I sit at that imperfect dining table sometimes, listening to forks and conversation, and I can still feel the other timeline, the one where I kept saying yes until there was nothing left to come home to. It's close enough to smell. That's how I know what my 40s cost. Not one dramatic mistake, just one small choice, repeated until it became my life.